All right, welcome back to Doctrines 2 as we continue our study in Christology. We're going to continue on also with the Atonement. Last time we were together, we talked about what is the Atonement, why was it necessary for Christ to die, all of the various things to go with the substitutionary atonement of Christ's death. To this week, I just want to talk about one particular issue that's very difficult. Scholars have gone over this for a very long time, for centuries, in fact, the extent of the atonement, or to answer the question, for whom did Christ die? Did Christ die for the whole world, or did Christ only die for the elect, for the church? Let's look at these various views to begin with. We'll talk about, first of all, what's sometimes considered the Reformed view, that's particular redemption or limited atonement. If you are familiar with Calvinism in any way, you have the 5 points of Calvinism, which spell out the word TULIP, T-U-L-I-P, which stand for total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. So we're in that middle point there, the L of the TULIP, limited atonement. The question there, or the statement there from Calvinists, is that Christ only died for the elect, and that his blood has no benefit whatsoever to the unbeliever in any way. In other words, that Christ only died for the church. And a couple of points to back this up was what they usually use is that God would not allow one drop of Christ's precious blood to be wasted. I've heard this many times from various Calvinist or various Reformed theologians, this statement that if Christ's blood was so precious that God would not allow one drop of it to be wasted on unbelievers. And finally here, their statement that if Christ's blood is so powerful that if it were to have any effect whatsoever on unbelievers, then it would save them to the uttermost without faith. So in other words, if Christ died for the world, then the whole world would be saved. They state that anything short of limited atonement would logically lead to universalism. So Christ could not have died for the world, because if Christ died for the world, then the whole world would be saved outside of salvation by faith. So that's their view. That's, like I said, this is considered the Reformed view or the Calvinist view of limited atonement, or sometimes called particular redemption. The other view on the opposite side would be that of non-reformists, sometimes called general redemption, or sometimes called unlimited atonement. And so let's look at what this says. This says that Christ died for the whole world, that his blood is sufficient to pay the redemption price for all sinners, that when Christ died for sinners, that he died for all sinners. Christ died for the whole world. And that the blood of Christ is so precious, is so priceless, that how could it help but pay for all of the sins of all of the sinners for the whole world, for all history. They say in this view, Christ is seen to have died for the whole world, making salvation available to all, but all those who adhere to unlimited atonement, none of them would say that Christ's death is effective for the whole world, that Christ is only going to save some, but that his salvation is available to all, because Christ's blood is sufficient to pay for their sins. Christ's blood is so valuable that it is able to pay that penalty for all sinners, regardless of whether or not they believe. And so when we talk about the redemption of sinners being like the marketplace of slaves, when Christ walked into the slave market of sin, he didn't just simply say, I'm going to pay for that slave, I'm going to pay for that slave, I'm going to pay for that slave. he put down the price to pay for the entire slave market and bought the whole marketplace because his blood is so precious, it's so priceless. That's what they would say. And because Christ died for all sinners, he is now able, because he paid the price for their sin, he now is able to do with them as he pleases. In other words, he now has become the master of all sinners. He now has paid for the price of all sinners. In other words, when he looks at an unbeliever now in the judgment, he can say, I died for you. I paid for your sins. You didn't believe in me. Go away from me. Go into utter darkness. Go into eternity without me. Because he paid for their sins, because he bought them with the price of his blood. This leads us to say, well, which one of these is accurate? Which one of these is right? Both of them seem to be right. And a couple more terms that I think we need to be familiar with in this is the ideas of common grace and the idea of efficacious grace. We're actually going to be talking about common grace when we begin our study of soteriology. We're actually going to be starting out with this idea of common grace versus efficacious grace. But I want to make you aware of it right now because it applies to the atonement. The idea of common grace is that Jesus Christ, or is that God is gracious to the whole world, that all of the world feels or experiences God's grace in some way. Whereas efficacious grace is that grace that is effective for salvation, to save someone. Common grace indicates that Christ died for the world to make salvation available to all. Efficacious grace, then, is the view that Christ's blood is then only effective for those who believe. So let's talk a little bit more in the next video about the scriptural backing between these two views. We'll start out with Reformation, then we'll talk about non-reformists. We'll see you in the next video.